Welcome to our next video. Today we're going to be showing you a demonstration of some different options to how to repair loose tuning pins. So over time, as pianos get older and they go through seasonal changes, the pin block material that the tuning pins would go into may swell and shrink, and over time the tuning pins can get loose in the holes, in which case they won't hold pitch very well. So we're going to show you a demonstration of a few different methods that you can use to tighten up the holes in the tuning pins so that the tuning pins hold. First of all, you want to determine tuners that tune all the time, they can usually tell if a tuning pin is loose just by how much pressure they have to put on their hammer. Now here I've got one tuning pin that's loose and one that's normal tightness. Okay, might not be able, probably can't see it when I'm doing it, but I have to put a lot more pressure in turning this tuning pin as opposed to turning this one. This one turns much easier. And sometimes you'll even come across a piano. You might come across it and play it, and you'll hear really, really sour note. That means the whole tuning pin has just slipped in the hole. So what'll happen in that case is you'll go to turn the pin, and when you let go of your hammer, the tuning hammer will just float right back down, and that just means it's really loose. So as far as equating how much torque or how much tightness you have on each tuning pin, you can use a torque wrench. If you've got a standard torque wrench with that has an end that fits a 3/8 inch socket like this one. This one actually has an adapter on it. It's got a 1/4 inch socket on the end, but I'm using an adapter here to move it up to 3/8 inch. You can purchase our ratchet star tool, and that'll fit on the end of the 3/8 inch socket. On one end, it's got the square to fit onto a 3/8 inch socket wrench, and the other end is a star-shaped, tapered star-shaped tip to fit onto the piano tuning pins. So that's designed for that. So, but what you can do is you can use the torque wrench to check your tightness. This one, I had measured it previously, but it's just under 50 inch-pounds. And this one here that's tighter, that's around 140, which is a pretty good amount of tightness. So in general, what you want to look for, if to be acceptable, it should be, right around 70 or higher. 70 is kind of on the low end of being tight, but it should hold fairly well if it's 70 or higher. If it's at 70, it just means that it's getting to the point where eventually it may not hold. But if it's down closer to 50 or 40, if it gets down to like 30, 35, it's going to do that thing where it just won't hold at all. Okay, so the pin is going to slip. So, but if a normal tightness is 120, roughly 130, something like that. But if it's in the 100 to 140 range, that's fairly normal. And if it's a little lower than that, it's not too bad, but it'll still hold, but it's just starting to get to the loose point. Okay, so some of the methods to use to fix, because we know this one is loose. The first one and the easiest, and the one that I use often if I'm in the field and I come across a piano, just has 1 or 2 loose pins, though I have used it on a whole set of pins on a piano that were on the loose side, but it's using the CA glue. And this is a really thin version. It's almost the consistency of water, and the reason you want to use the really thin version is because what you're going to do, now, of course, this jig that I have here shows the pin block and the tuning pin, but it doesn't show the plate or the bushing. But it'll apply the same way. What you want to do is you want to apply the glue right at the base of the tuning pin. Okay, and you can put it right at the plate, or right at the wood tuning pin bushing if it has one. But you want to pour that glue right into the hole, and just do a few drops. Okay, let it settle. It's best to let it sit. What I'll do is, usually if I'm tuning and I've noticed right away when I start the tuning process that there's a couple loose tuning pins. What I'll do is I'll apply the glue when I start tuning. By the time I'm done tuning the rest of the piano, I can usually go back and pull it up to pitch, and it'll hold. So what that does essentially is, this glue, it wicks down around the tuning pin and soaks into the wood of the pin block, which and then because it swells the wood, what happens is it'll swell that wood, and then when the glue dries, it'll still be swelled, and it'll hold that tightness, which will essentially make the hole smaller or tighter on the tuning pin. So that's what it does, and it can be that if you apply it and it's still loose, you can do a second application. If it's not quite tight enough, you can put more glue in there. So that's a fairly simple method. Especially if you've got an older piano that it's running out of life, but you want to make it so it still works for a while. You can use the CA glue method. The other thing you can do is you can drive the tuning pin further into the pin block. Okay, this tool here is a tuning pin setter, and it's got a plunger at the end, so that you can set that on the end of the tuning pin, and by tapping on the end of it with a hammer, you can set that tuning pin further into the pin block. So you're putting it into new wood that hasn't been enlarged. Okay, and that essentially will make the tuning pin feel tighter. Okay, so that's the second method, is using a tuning pin setter, something to drive the tuning pin further into the block. Another thing you could do, these last two methods aren't always effective if you've got cracks in the pin block, because what it could do is it could widen those cracks possibly. So it just depends. But what you can do is you can take larger tuning pins. We sell tuning pins by the dozen, so if you've got a couple, you can buy a dozen. And what you need to do is you need to loosen the tuning pin enough so that you can get that string off the old tuning pin. Okay, and what I'm going to do, the becket is the part that goes into the tuning pin hole, and I'm just going to pry that out. You want to loosen it enough so that you can get that string off of the tuning pin without loosening your coil. So you still got the coil there. And then what you'll do is you'll unwind the pin out of the block, and then put the new pin in. And what you want to do is you want to put the new pin in by pounding it. Okay, and you can use a tuning pin punch to set on there. You can use the tuning pin setter if you've got one, and use that to pound the new tuning pin. You always want to go up two. Generally, if it's loose, you want to go up at least 2 tuning pin sizes. Okay, so if yours is a size 2, you want to go up to a size 4. If it's a size 3, you want to go up to a size 5 at least. So, and then once you've got that new larger tuning pin in the pin block, you're going to slip the coil back over, and then get that becket and try to pry that becket back into the hole. It's not always an easy thing, but that's what you'll do. Now, so that's another method, is to replace the tuning pin with a larger tuning with a larger tuning pin. A similar method, but it's still utilizing the same tuning pin that you had, is using a metal tuning pin bushing. Okay, and what this does, this it goes into the hole. Of course, you have to take the old tuning pin out, just like if you were to replace the tuning pin. But you take that old tuning pin out and then put this inside the hole. Okay, and you can push it in. Sometimes it'll take a hammer to push it down inside, but something to, and it's got a separation, so it'll close as big or as little as you need to. So, but put that into the hole, and then put your tuning pin back inside the metal tuning pin bushing, and the thickness of this bushing is going to essentially make the hole smaller, so that the tuning pin will be tighter in the hole. So those two methods work as well. Again, we've got the CA glue, which you just apply to the base of the tuning pin. Using the tuning pin setter. If you have enough, now with the tuning pin setter, one thing I should mention is that you want to make sure that you've got enough room at the bottom of the coil and the plate. You don't want that coil to go all the way down to the plate. You still want to have a little bit of room, but usually you've got some room on most pianos to be able to push that pin further into the pin block without the coil coming too close to the plate. The other was replacing with a larger tuning pin or using a metal tuning pin bushing. So those are the methods that you can use when you have a case of tuning pins that are too loose, to be able to make it so that the piano will stay in tune or can be tuned. If you have any questions, feel free to visit our website. It's howardpianoindustries.com.